She stepped off the train into a frozen town, where no one had come to greet her, not even the man who sent for her. Asterisk, the snow had already swallowed the tracks when the train hissed into Hollow Creek. Thick smoke coiled against the ashen sky as the final carriage screeched to a halt. Steam poured like a ghost into the frozen air, and silence returned just as quickly as it was broken. Maeve O'Sullivan stepped down from the last step of the passenger car, one gloved hand tightening around the handle of her worn leather trunk. Her boots sank into snow deeper than she'd ever seen. Ireland was cold, sure, but this was something else. This cold was mean. It bit through every stitch of wool and whispered things no woman traveling alone should hear. She stood still for a moment, blinking, shivering, her copper-red curls barely visible beneath her green hood. Her cheeks were flushed from windburn. Her lips already cracked, trembled not just from the cold, but from something worse. Fear. Maeve looked left, then right. She saw nothing, just the outline of a town in the distance, faint yellow candlelight flickering behind frost-covered windows. Saloon signs hung still. No horses stirred, no voices, no man with a coat and flower in hand waiting on the platform. Husband. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter. The name was faded, written in hurried ink. Thomas L. Granger, postmaster and blacksmith, Hollow Creek, Montana. He had written 6 months ago through an agency in New York. Promised a home. Promised warmth. Promised her she'd never be alone again. Maeve bit her lip. He probably didn't get the wire, she whispered to herself. Maybe the roads are blocked. Maybe. But as the train hissed again and began to pull away behind her, no one appeared. She was alone, truly bitterly alone. A whistle blew, and the train vanished into white nothingness. A figure watched from behind a frostbitten window across the square. Old Mrs. Harper, the widow who ran the general store, narrowed her eyes. "She's here," she murmured to no one. Behind her, her grandson rubbed his arms for warmth. "Who's that?" Mrs. Harper squinted harder. "The Irish girl. The bride. The one Thomas sent for? But Pa said he ain't gonna marry her no more. Said we got no food left to feed ourselves, let alone a woman." Mrs. Harper didn't answer. She just stared. Maeve took a step toward town, dragging the heavy trunk. Behind her, her breath fogged in front of her lips, turning to ice against her lashes. She passed a half-torn poster nailed to a crooked pole. "Bride wanted, must be of strong constitution. No family obligations." Her face twisted. "Strong constitution," she muttered. "Right." With each step, the snow deepened. The wind howled louder. And the town of Hollow Creek held its breath, asterisk. Maeve's fingers were turning blue by the time she reached the town's edge. Hollow Creek looked like a place trying not to die. Every window was shuttered, every porch empty, the snow swallowed. Sound, and even the wind seemed cautious, like it knew something was coming that wasn't meant to be disturbed. She walked past a chapel. Its bell long rusted in place. No footprints anywhere, not in the alleys. Not in the snowdrifts against the saloon walls. Just silence. And judgment. She stopped in front of a sign that creaked with every gust. Granger and Sons, blacksmithing, repairs. Her breath caught. This was it. The man who had written her letters. The man who'd promised to wait at the station with gloves and a wool coat. The man who said he'd build her a bed with his own hands. She knocked. Nothing. She waited. Then knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Finally, the door opened a sliver, just wide enough for one wary brown eye to look through. A young boy, 10, maybe 11. He stared. She smiled gently, trembling. "I'm Maeve O'Sullivan. Came. On the train? You're your father?" The boy didn't blink. "He ain't here." She tilted her head. "Can I come in and wait?" The boy hesitated. Then a woman's voice snapped from deeper inside. "Shut the door, Eli. Don't let the cold in." The door slammed. Maeve stood motionless for a moment, and turned, hands still gripping the letter. In her coat pocket like it could warm her. The saloon was next. She stepped inside and felt every eye turn. 3 men at the bar, 2 by the stove. The piano was silent, its keys dust-covered. A bald man with a star pinned to his vest raised an eyebrow. "Well, now, what do we have here?" he drawled. Maeve straightened. "I'm looking for Thomas Granger. He sent for me." The sheriff sipped from a chipped mug. "Did he now?" Man near the fire chuckled. "Heard Thomas changed his mind. Got cold feet before the snow even came." Maeve's face flushed. "He promised men promise a lot of things," the sheriff said, cutting her off. "That don't mean nothin' when winter's knocking and mouths need feedin'." She felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. Another man leaned in. "You Irish?" She nodded. He smirked. "Well, missy, you picked the wrong season and the wrong bloodline." Maeve turned before her tears could spill. She stepped back into the snowstorm, stomach hollow, throat raw. The wind had picked up, harder now, almost angry. That night, she found shelter. In the old chapel, the door barely shut behind her. The pews were as cold as the stone floor. She lit a single match and held it in her cupped hands. The tiny flame trembled just like she did. "I came to start a life," she whispered, "not to be buried in one." The wind howled through the broken stained glass above her still. Something in her eyes refused to break. Her breath fogged the air like smoke from a coming fire. Asterisk if you believe no woman should be turned away like this, like the video, and share her story. It might reach someone who needs it. And don't forget to subscribe, this tale's only just begun. Asterisk by morning, the chapel felt like a tomb. Maeve's fingers had gone stiff. Her breath came out in shivers. She hadn't truly slept, only drifted in and out of half-conscious prayers. Holding her trunk like a coffin of memories, a sliver of pale light broke through the cracked stained glass, casting red and blue shards onto the stone floor. The wind outside had died down, but snow still poured from the sky like ashes falling from heaven. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since the train. Her lips were chapped, and her water had frozen solid in her flask. She rose barely and dragged herself toward the general store. Her boots crunched over fresh snow, but even the crows didn't bother cawing anymore. Not here, not in Hollow Creek. When she opened the store door, a small bell rang above her head. The warmth inside hit her like a forgotten memory. Mrs. Harper stood behind the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Maeve nodded. "I don't have money yet, but I could help sweep, or clean, or sew." Mrs. Harper said nothing. Maeve pointed weakly to a loaf of bread and a jar of jam on the shelf. "Just a little something, please." The old woman didn't move. "Town's on rations. I understand, but you're not from this town. You're not on the list." Maeve blinked. List. Winter list. Names of who gets what. We barely got enough for our own. Can't just hand food to anyone who wanders in with a pretty face and a soft accent. Maeve's throat tightened. She stepped back, bumping into a crate behind her. "I'll leave," she whispered. "I just thought—" Mrs. Harper watched her coldly. "You thought wrong." As Maeve turned to go, a small boy tugged his grandmother's sleeve. It was Eli, the same one who shut the door in her face. He looked up at Mrs. Harper. "She's cold, Grandma." "She looks hungry." No. The old woman's face twisted, not soft, but unsure. A flicker of something old and buried. She reached under the counter, pulled out a single apple, dented, bruised, but whole. "Here," she said, placing it gently on the counter. Maeve looked at it like it was gold. She took it, held it close. "Thank you, truly." Mrs. Harper didn't reply. Outside, Maeve sat. On a frozen bench, apple in hand, her fingers trembled as she took the first bite. The sweetness hit her tongue like a lullaby, and then, for the first time since she arrived, she cried, not quiet tears. Not polite, held-back sobs, but the kind that come from the bottom of the soul, the kind that rise up when you've held everything in for far too long. A door creaked somewhere behind her. Someone watched. Across the street, behind the boarded-up windows of the saloon. The sheriff watched her crumble. She won't last a week. He muttered to the bartender, but the bartender, a silent man with tired eyes, said nothing. He just watched Maeve with something almost like guilt that night. The storm returned, wilder, angrier. It clawed at the town like a beast hunting warmth. But in the chapel, by the flickering light of a stub candle, Maeve sat writing in her journal. Her hands shook, but her words were steady. If I am to die here, at least let it be known I came with hope in my heart. By the third day, Maeve's cheeks had gone hollow. She spent her mornings walking the edges of Hollow Creek, offering help to anyone who'd open their door. Some let her sweep a porch. Some didn't open at all. Most simply looked at her like she was a burden carved out of ice. Still, she stayed kind, stayed soft. Even when the wind wasn't, she was returning to the chapel with her, arms wrapped around a bundle of firewood she'd earned sweeping the schoolhouse steps when she heard it. A sound no one should hear alone in a blizzard. Oh, cried small, desperate. Human, Maeve froze. The wind howled again, covering it for a moment. But then it came again, more frantic. She dropped the wood and ran. Snow slapped her face like open hands as she fought against the wind. Turning around the corner of the old stable, behind the church, there half buried in snow, lay a child. Little girl, no more than 5, wrapped in a blanket that had long since given up the fight. Her lips were purple, her eyes barely open. A soft whimper left her frostbitten mouth. Maeve didn't hesitate. She threw off her cloak and knelt, scooping the girl into her arms. The child's skin was like ice. "It's okay, sweetheart," Maeve whispered. I've got you now." She ran, boots slipping, heart racing, straight to the chapel. The door slammed behind her as she kicked it shut with her heel. She laid the child near the small iron stove and wrapped every layer she had around her. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her hands to the girl's cheeks. "Don't you dare go." She lit every candle she had, placed her hands around the child's tiny feet, trying to give her every ounce of warmth left in her bones. Hours passed. Maeve hummed softly. Old Irish lullabies her mother once sang to her during thunder. Songs of oceans and green hills and home. The child didn't respond until, slowly, her little fingers twitched, her lips parted, and she whispered, "Mama." Maeve's heart shattered. She blinked through tears. "No, darling. Here." The next morning, the town woke to news that traveled faster than the wind. That Irish bride pulled a child out the snow, saved her life. People gathered in whispers. Whose child? Oh, no one knows. Could be one of the Dawson twins, maybe snuck out. She stayed out all night with that little one, lit the chapel stove herself. For the first time, Hollow Creek spoke of Maeve not as a burden, but as something different, maybe a blessing, maybe a woman braver than most men in that town. Back at the chapel, the little girl stirred again. Maeve fed her warm broth she had begged from the bartender, who silently handed her a flask without a word. The girl looked up. "What's your name?" Maeve asked gently. "Ellie." Maeve smiled through cracked lips. "Well, Ellie, I think we're going to be all right." The storm had calmed, but not the town. Maeve sat beside Ellie in the chapel, brushing the child's hair gently with her fingers. She'd fashioned a little bed from old hymnals and folded quilts given by the schoolteacher. The first woman to knock on the chapel door without suspicion in her eyes. "Your mama must be missing you," Maeve said softly. Ellie only looked at her, wide-eyed, unsure. It had been 2 days. Still no one had come for the girl. Maeve had asked around discreetly, but no mother claimed Ellie. No father knocked. No one searched. Just another forgotten soul, like her. At sunset, the chapel door creaked again. This time, it wasn't a child or a kind stranger. It was Sheriff Emmett Clay, hat in hand, boots dusted with old snow. His eyes scanned the scene. Ellie curled beside the stove, Maeve holding a chipped mug of tea between raw hands. He stepped in slowly. "Heard you took in a lost child." Maeve rose cautiously. She was freezing to death. "I couldn't just leave her." The sheriff didn't speak for a moment, then said, "You lit the stove?" Maeve nodded, his brows lifted. "Takes a heavy hand to get that old iron roaring. Most men here can't do it without kindling for miles." She held his gaze. "A woman on her own learns to build fire quick, or she doesn't last long." The sheriff looked down at Kame. "To check on the girl, that's all," he said awkwardly. "Town's wondering if she's yours." Maeve laughed bitterly. "If she were mine, I wouldn't be sleeping in a chapel with strangers' quilts." He looked at her again, this time a little longer. A silence stretched between them. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the altar. "Venison stew," he said. "From my own stores." Maeve stared. "Why?" He hesitated. "You saved a child. And you did it without asking who she belonged to?" She walked slowly to the cloth, unwrapped it. The scent hit her like a memory from another life. Rich, warm, kind. "Thank you," she said, voice cracking. He nodded once, then turned. At the door, he paused. "If you ever need wood or protection, you come to the jailhouse. Ask for me. Name's Emmett." He left without waiting for her reply. That night, Maeve sat beside Ellie again, spooning warm stew into the child's mouth one small bite at a time. When Ellie had finished and fallen asleep, Maeve looked up at the stained glass window overhead. The snow outside had begun to glitter under moonlight. For the first time since her boots touched Hollow Creek, she felt less invisible. Across town, inside the saloon, voices rose again. "She's got the sheriff's attention now. Maybe that foreigner's not as useless as we thought. Still no sign of Thomas Granger." "Nope. Word is he left Hollow Creek weeks ago. Never told the sheriff." "You think she knows?" "Not yet." Silence. Then someone muttered, "Town might need her more than he ever did." Snow blanketed the town like a ghost, refusing to leave. Maeve awoke to the soft rustle of tiny footsteps. Ellie stood at the chapel door, her blanket trailing behind her like a little cape. Her cheeks were flushed now, not from fever, but from warmth. "I dreamed you were my mama again," she whispered. Maeve knelt and pulled her close. "You're safe now, I promise." She meant it. For the first time since Hollow Creek swallowed her, she meant it. Later that day, while searching for more candles in the chapel's forgotten back room, Maeve found a box, one covered in dust, marked "Unclaimed Post." Curious. She opened it. Inside were envelopes, dozens, letters with stamps, faded by time and cold. Her eyes scanned the names. Most she didn't know, but then her breath caught. One envelope was addressed in fine ink, delicate handwriting. To May Flannery, care of Thomas Granger. Hollow Creek. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The paper crackled in the silence. "Maeve, I cannot wait to see your face. I have made everything ready. The town is small, but you'll have a home. And a name. I'll wait at the station come December. Forever yours, Thomas." Maeve staggered back. She'd never received this. She looked at the date. 2 months before her arrival, she checked the box again. Another letter, and another. All from Thomas, all written before December. All unopened. All never delivered. She sank onto the cold wooden floor, the letters falling around her like snow. He had written, he had meant to be there. So what happened? She stormed into the general store later that afternoon. Clutching the bundle of letters in her gloved hand, Mrs. Harper raised an eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Maeve threw the letters on the counter. "These were never given to me." The woman picked up one and frowned. "From Granger?" "Yes, all of them. I arrived with nothing, thinking he abandoned me. I was wrong." The old woman's eyes shifted, uncertain. "Those should have been delivered. And who stopped them?" Duh. Mrs. Harper didn't answer, but someone else did, from behind a shelf. The bartender's silent Ben stepped forward. "I know who handled the mail then," he said quietly. "It wasn't the postmaster." Maeve stared. "Who then?" Ben looked at Mrs. Harper, then back at Maeve. "Sheriff Clay." That night, as Ellie slept peacefully, Maeve sat by the window. The letters spread before her like shattered promises. Fire crackled, casting flickers of gold across her pale face. Her heart was torn in two. Thomas had written, Thomas had planned. But Sheriff Emmett Clay, the same man who brought her stew, the one who told her Thomas left, had been the one holding her letters back. Why? Why lie? Why hide the truth? More importantly, where was Thomas now? She stared into the fire, jaw clenched. Something was wrong in Hollow Creek. Very wrong, and she had just begun to dig. The chapel bell hadn't rung in weeks. Not since the storm began. But the silence of Hollow Creek cracked that morning as Maeve stepped out with her head high. Clutching the letters, each one felt heavier now. Heavier than snow. Heavier than betrayal? She wasn't just a mail-order bride, anymore. She was a woman with questions. She walked straight to the sheriff's office inside. Sheriff Clay sat at his desk, polishing his badge. When he saw her, he stood. Maeve, she tossed the letters onto his desk. They scattered like leaves in a windstorm. Did you think I'd never find them? She asked, voice tight. He looked at the pages, sighed once. Didn't deny it. I was going to tell you, he said finally. But when you arrived, and he was gone, I thought maybe it was better you didn't know. Better for who? She asked, her voice cracking. You let me think he abandoned me, left me in the snow like a stray? Why? Sheriff. Clay ran a hand through his graying hair. Because Granger left town weeks before you came. Left a debt behind. A bad one. Maeve stepped closer, anger rising. You thought I'd what? Forgive the town faster, if I believed I was unwanted? Thought if you knew the truth about who he really was, you'd leave. Hollow. Creek needed you more than he ever did. She shook her head. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to play God with people's lives. He didn't argue. Just stared. After a long silence, he said, he wasn't coming back, Maeve, but I still deserved the truth. He nodded slowly. I was wrong, he said. She left without another word. That evening, saloon buzzed. She confronted the sheriff letters. Hidden. Granger owed money. Real bad folk. Clay tried to protect her, or maybe the town. They say she's got fire in her blood. She's not just some foreign bride anymore. She's Hollow Creek. Now, back in the chapel, Ellie traced her finger along the stained glass windows. Maeve stared at the fire, mind racing. If Thomas left debts, where, with who, and why, hadn't anyone tried to collect, lest they were waiting, watching just before? Midnight a knock came. Not the sheriff, not a friend. A man in a long coat, covered in frost, hat low. Face shadowed. Maeve didn't move. The man didn't. Speak. He held out a letter. Folded, sealed with red wax. She took it slowly. No return address. Just 4 words in bold. Black ink. He belongs to us. The man turned and vanished into the snow. Maeve shut the door, locked it, and backed away, hands shaking, because for the first time since arriving in Hollow Creek, she realized Thomas wasn't lost. He was owned, and now, maybe, she was too. Maeve stared at the letter long into the night. He belongs to us, not a threat, claim. Outside, the snow fell softer now, but inside her chest, a storm raged. She lit a candle, opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The parchment inside was simple, neat. Maeve Flannery. Thomas Granger owed us more than gold. He promised labor, a lifetime's worth. He ran. Don't forget, stay out of it. The marked sons. Maeve dropped the letter like it burned. The marked sons. She'd heard whispers. Even across the ocean, a gang not just of criminals, but of handlers. Men who bought and sold others like cattle. Once you owed them, you weren't a debtor. You were a possession, and Thomas had sold himself. The next morning, Maeve returned to the sheriff's office, but this time not with anger. With questions, Sheriff Clay looked exhausted, as if sleep hadn't dared visit him. I need to know what he did, she said. Clay pulled out a worn file from a locked drawer. He opened it carefully, pushing it toward her. Granger came here with debt on his back, lost his family to sickness, tried to start over. Maeve scanned the papers. Loans, stamps, seals. One word jumped out again and again. The marked sons. I begged him not to deal with them, Clay said. But he was desperate. Promised them 10 years of servitude in exchange for gold to build his ranch. Buy supplies. Send for you. Maeve's throat tightened. All for me, she whispered. Clay nodded. But then he ran. Disappeared. Left. The contract unpaid. She closed the file, hands pale and trembling. So now they want me, she said quietly. They don't want you, Clay said. They want leverage. Maeve's eyes narrowed. They think if I panic, I'll lead them. To him? Or pay his debt? At the chapel, Ellie sensed something had changed. Maeve brushed her hair gently, but her hands were slower now. Distant? Is Thomas coming? Ellie asked innocently. Maeve blinked. What? Is he your man? Your husband? She paused, then nodded. He was supposed to be. Are you sad? Maeve smiled weakly. A little, but I'm more angry. Angry at what the world does to kind men, and how women like me are expected to just endure.
Ellie looked up.
You don't seem like someone who endures. You seem like someone who fights. Maeve froze, a child's words. Simple, but truer than anything spoken by adults. She hugged Ellie tightly. No one's taking you. She whispered. Ellie didn't know what it meant, but Maeve did. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the chapel. Window, shotgun across her lap, candles lit like a warning. Outside. Hoofbeats echoed in the snow. 3 riders, no names. No greetings, just silence. Maeve stepped out before they could knock. I'm Maeve Flannery, she said, and I'm not hiding. The tallest rider dismounted, his breath fogging in the cold. You carry his blood? No, she said. But I carry his name. A tense silence. Then the rider handed her a small pouch, heavy blood on the cloth. For the debt, said. Maeve opened it. Coins. Dirty, stained, but real. He sent this, the rider said. From where he's run, she stared at it. Tears. Weld, he's alive? The man shrugged. For now. Then rode off without another word. Maeve didn't move, just stood there in the snow, clutching a bloodied pouch full of coin, and a heart breaking in pieces she didn't know how to pick up by dawn. Hollow Creek was a town wrapped in silence and cold shame. Sheriff Clay stood on the porch of his office smoking a pipe with shaky hands. He watched the sun rise, though. It barely pierced the thick snow-laden clouds. Maeve hadn't come for help. Not last night. Not ever. She didn't need help anymore. Inside the chapel, the pews had been pushed back. Blankets lined the floor. Half the town's children lay bundled together like seeds waiting for spring, and in the center of it all stood Maeve, no longer a stranger, no longer just someone's bride. She was hope. The kind that burns slow but never dims. She hung the last curtain across the broken window, sealing out the wind. Then she turned to the people gathered. Mrs. Harper, Ben the bartender, the blacksmith's wife with her crying infant. We wait no longer, she said. The cold may not kill us, but silence will. They stared, unsure. Maeve stepped forward, her voice steady. Your sheriff let this happen. Your men watched. But I carried your sick, nursed your young, and stood down men in the snow. A hush fell over them. You can either bury yourselves in fear or stand up and rebuild this town with me. Blacksmith's wife blinked. Rebuild how? Maeve pulled out the coin pouch the marked sons had delivered. With this, she said, and with work, and with truth. She placed the blood-stained pouch on the chapel altar, clinked heavily. That gold is paid for in pain. We're going to use it to keep Hollow Creek alive. By midday, Maeve walked the town square with her sleeves rolled, hands red from fixing the fence outside the general store. She gave orders calmly, clearly. Kids were given sleds to transport firewood. The men who once muttered behind her back now followed her lead. When Mrs. Harper refused to share supplies, Maeve knocked once, entered, and reminded her, loudly, That kindness during storms isn't charity. It's survival, Mrs. Harper folded. Sheriff Clay found her by the stables. You've stirred the town, you know, Maeve said without looking at him. I woke it, he exhaled. You're becoming more than a bride. She turned. Never. Needed to be one. I needed to be heard. A beat passed. Then she asked, Did you ever truly look for Thomas? Clay hesitated. No. Then don't talk to me like a man who tried. She walked away, boots crunching in the snow like thunder. That night, Hollow Creek was different. Fires burned in every hearth. Windows glowed again. Children laughed, not loud, but enough to remind the town they weren't dead yet. Maeve sat by the chapel window once more, but not with a gun. With a notebook she wrote names, people to feed, people to warm, people to remind that this place is still worth living in. Ellie crawled into her lap. You look like someone important, she whispered. Maeve smiled. I feel like someone who finally matters. Outside, the snow kept falling, but for the first time, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like a beginning. The moon sat low and full, casting blue shadows over Hollow Creek's fresh snow. Inside the chapel, Maeve stirred from restless sleep. Ellie lay curled beside her, breathing softly, but something felt wrong then. A knock, not gentle, and not hesitant, hard. Slow, heavy 3 knocks. Maeve sat up, heart hammering. She reached under her cot, pulled the shotgun close, quietly stood. She moved through the chapel aisle like a ghost. Candle in hand, another knock. Louder she opened the door, and there they were, 3 riders, again, only this time. Not messengers, collectors. The lead man stepped forward, face hidden behind a snow-dusted coat and low hat. You've spent the gold, he said. Maeve didn't answer. We gave you a warning, he continued, but you didn't run. You didn't. Stay quiet, you lead. Maeve gripped the shotgun tighter. I didn't ask for your money, but it was his debt, and you carry his name. Then let me give you his answer, she said coldly. She stepped onto the porch, loading the gun with a click that echoed in the icy air. Go to hell. The second man chuckled. Lady, we've been there. We run it. Maeve raised the shotgun. You'll leave this town. You'll never come back. Or you'll find out just how Irish a bride can be when she's got nothing left to lose. The leader tilted his head. You think you scare us? No, she said softly. But I know how fear works. It only wins if I bow. She fired it. Shot into the air. Boom. Louder than thunder in the quiet town. Lights flicked on. Doors opened. One by one, people stepped outside. The bartender, the blacksmith, Mrs. Harper, even Sheriff Clay. No. One held weapons, but they stood, beside her, behind her. For her, the marked men paused. One of them sneered. Is this supposed to scare us? Maeve stepped forward, eyes burning. It's not about scaring you. It's about showing them, she gestured to the crowd, that no one owns them anymore. Silence, breath visible in the air. Then the leader turned his horse. This isn't over, he said. He still belongs to us. Maeve's voice was iron. Then you'll have to go through me. And they rode off, disappearing into the snowfall. Inside the chapel, Ellie sat awake. Maeve returned slowly, breath still shaky. You didn't run, Ellie said. Maeve sat beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. Neither did you. A pause. Are they gone? Ellie whispered. For now. Maeve stared at the fire. But they'll come again. Ellie looked up. You'll fight? Maeve turned toward her. I'll do more than fight, she said. I'll finish. The next morning, Hollow Creek lay in a fragile peace. Snow still fell, but it felt manageable. Fires warmed more than just rooms, they warmed hearts. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't taste like fear. Maeve moved through town like she belonged there because now she did. People greeted her with nods, cups of broth, even smiles. But as she helped Ben shovel snow from the chapel, steps, a sound stopped her cold. Hooves. Fast, uneven. A single rider approached down the ridge road, hunched low. As if barely hanging on, Maeve's heart dropped. The coat, the gait, the way he held. His shoulder dashed no, it couldn't be. She stepped forward, boots crunching in rhythm with her heartbeat. The man fell from the saddle before the horse stopped. His coat torn, his face covered in snow, beard wild. But the eyes, Thomas, Ben whispered, is that Maeve was already running. She dropped to her knees beside him. Thomas? Coughed, blinked through the ice. Maeve, she trembled. Alive, he nodded weakly. Barely. She helped him sit up, the town slowly gathering around in stunned silence. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched him. Said you were gone. I almost was. The canyon collapsed. I was trapped. Found by a trapper. He kept me alive. He touched her cheek. I thought about you every night. Maeve's breath hitched. Then why didn't you send word? He paused. The crowd watched. Thomas's eyes shifted. I couldn't. I owed something. Something I couldn't outrun. Maeve's hand stiffened. Was it the marked sons? She asked quietly. He didn't answer. Sheriff Clay stepped closer. You ran from them. You left her holding your debt. Thomas stood shakily. I didn't run. I tried to fix it. But I failed. And I was ashamed. He turned to Maeve. You weren't supposed to suffer for me. Maeve looked into his eyes and saw it. Cowardice. She stepped back. You didn't die, she whispered. You abandoned me. Thomas reached for her. Maeve. She shook her head. Let me believe you were gone. You left them to collect what you owed. And when they came, I stood alone. His face crumpled. But you're not alone now, he said. I'm here. We can still know. Her voice was iron. I didn't survive this town to go back to being someone's afterthought. The crowd held its breath. I am not the same woman you wrote letters to. I became her because you vanished. She stepped past him, back to the chapel, to the people. To her purpose, Thomas stood in the snow, watching the woman he once knew walk away, and realizing he'd never known her at all. That night, the chapel's fire burned low, but Maeve didn't sleep. She sat in the front pew, alone, staring at her trembling hands. Not from fear, from rage. Outside, the snow whispered along the windows. Hollow Creek lay in quiet, unaware that its turning point was being forged in silence. Thomas had returned broken, agorly, and late. The marked sons would return too. She could feel it like frost in her bones. And Maeve had had enough. She stood, walked to the back, opened the old storage room where they kept broken tools and forgotten furniture. And there it was, an iron forge. Cold for decades, she pulled off her coat, rolled up her sleeves, and stared at it. I am not the mail order. Bride, she whispered. I am the answer to every man who thought I wouldn't fight back. She threw logs in, struck the flint. Flames leapt, the forge hissed to life. By sunrise, the entire town had heard the clang of steel on steel. Maeve hammered horseshoes into spikes, repurposed rusted saw blades into traps. Mrs. Harper brought hot broth and said nothing, just placed a hand on her shoulder. Ben offered his father's old revolver. She accepted. Even little Ellie stitched thick cloths together into padded winter vests. This wasn't just Maeve's stand now, it was theirs. Sheriff Clay visited mid-morning. Maeve, sure about this? He asked, looking at the anvil. She didn't stop hammering. I was sure the day I walked off that train. They'll come with more men. Then I'll have more fire. We nodded. We're with you. At noon, Thomas appeared at the chapel steps. He looked smaller than ever. I want to help, he said softly. Maeve didn't even turn. You helped enough by leaving. He flinched, but didn't argue. She turned toward him, sweat on her brow. Soot on her cheeks, her eyes flames. If you want to do one good thing, ride to the next town. Get news out. Tell them what's coming. Thomas nodded slowly. If I come back, that'll be between you and God. As dusk approached, the chapel bell rang once, then twice. It wasn't Sunday. It was warning. Riders on the ridge. Marked sons were back, but this time, they weren't chasing gold. They wanted obedience. Silence. They weren't ready for her. Maeve stood at the front steps, shotgun in hand, church behind her, Hollow Creek by her side. The snow fell harder now, but inside her, only fire. The storm rolled in heavier than before. Snow whipped across Hollow Creek like nature itself was bracing for what was coming. But inside the chapel, it was calm. Focused Maeve adjusted the straps of her winter vest, made from thick canvas ellies stitched together. Her shotgun was polished. Ammunition sat neatly in a wooden box beside the altar. Sheriff. Clay laid out a crude map on a table. They'll come from the eastern ridge, he said. Always do. They think we're weakest there. They're wrong, Maeve said. The townsfolk stood around her, not just men, but women, teenagers.
Ow.
Even old Mr. Dobbins, with one good eye and no shooting hand, offering to distract with smoke bombs he'd made in his youth. No one was idle. No, one was afraid, because Maeve wasn't. As the sun vanished behind steel-gray clouds, a horn blew low long. Sinister Ellie flinched. Maeve squeezed her hand. They come. From the ridge, dark silhouettes emerged. 6 riders, then 10, then more. Their coats black, eyes hidden, guns drawn. The marked sons had returned. Maeve didn't wait. She raised her rifle, aimed high, fired once into the sky. A signal, all across Hollow Creek. Lanterns flickered on. Barrels rolled into alleys' ropes. Tightened on rooftops, windows unlacked, and then boom. The first trap snapped, a rope flung up from the snow. Pulling 2 horses down, men shouted before they could react. Ben lit the oil trough running beneath the ridge path. Fire exploded in a line. Separating the riders from each other, Sheriff Clay stepped onto the saloon rooftop and yelled, "This is your last warning. Turn back or be buried." But the leader rode forward, the same one Maeve had faced on her porch. Didn't speak. He raised his pistol and Maeve fired first. His hat flew off. The bullet skimmed his cheek. Blood bloomed. He howled. Another trap sprung. Iron spikes hidden in snow caught a rider's leg. Screams echoed through the valley. The marked sons scattered. But Hollow Creek stood its ground. From alleyways, townsfolk took cover and returned fire. From windows, glass shattered with purpose as rifles poked through. Maeve moved like she'd trained for years, ducking behind barrels, signaling with hand gestures, and reloading with calm precision. This wasn't chaos. This was strategy, and Maeve had led it. Then, a new sound, a second set of hooves. Fast. From the west, everyone turned another group. 5 men, guns drawn. Reinforcements? Sheriff Clay muttered. Maeve narrowed her eyes, but one of them raised a hand and shouted, "We ain't." With them, Thomas. He'd come back. And behind him, 2 marshals from the next county over. Weapons raised, the tide turned. The marked sons paused, then scattered like dust in the wind. Maeve stood in the center of town. Smoke rising around her as snow fell heavy over their shoulders. They had held the line together. She didn't smile. She just exhaled and whispered, "They won't forget this night." The snow had finally stopped, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the storm. The main street of Hollow Creek lay battered, smoking wood, shattered glass, spent shells littered the ground. Yet not a single innocent life had been lost because one woman had refused to surrender Maeve. She stood in the chapel doorway as the sun crept over the white horizon. Its golden light touched her face, but she didn't flinch. She was staring at the man standing on the steps. Thomas. He held his hat in his hands. His face was worn, more from guilt than war. Maeve. His voice cracked. "I didn't know." "How to come back?" "Came back with more guns," she replied, voice sharp like cold iron, not apologies. "I did what I could." "No, Thomas," she interrupted, stepping down, boots crunching over ice. "You did what was easy. When things got hard, you disappeared. When I needed a partner, I got a memory. Thomas swallowed. The town watched from doorways and windows, breathless. But I came back. Maeve stood still. You did? And you helped. That matters. Thomas's eyes flickered. So, is there a chance? Maeve tilted her head. Do you know what saved this town? Not guns, not men, but belief. A woman believed she was more than a bride bought by paper. He nodded slowly. You were never just a bride, Maeve. She looked at him then, long and deep. I know. Later that afternoon, Hollow Creek began to rebuild. Men patched rooftops. Women collected spent bullets. Children played in the snow like nothing had happened. But something had. The town had changed. Maeve had changed it. In the saloon, the mayor, who'd once doubted her, stood on a crate and made it official. I hereby declare. Maeve O'Sullivan, the guardian of Hollow Creek. The crowd erupted in cheers. Maeve didn't cry. She simply bowed her head, as if receiving something long overdue. She didn't want glory. She just wanted to matter, and now. She did that night. By the fire, Ben asked her quietly, so, will you marry him now? Maeve smiled faintly. I never needed a husband to be whole. If he wants to walk beside me, he better learn to carry his own weight. Ben laughed. You're something else, Miss Maeve. No, Ben. I'm exactly what I was meant to be. As the stars blinked to life, Maeve stood outside the chapel. The storm had passed, but she had become one. Weeks passed since the battle that could have buried Hollow Creek in snow and silence, but instead, something rare had bloomed. Hope, the kind that stuck like warmth in winter. Maeve O'Sullivan was no longer the woman who stepped off the mail train, shivering and uncertain. She was now stitched into the soul of Hollow Creek. People came to her not out of charity, but respect. Ellie, once timid, walked with fire in her steps. Learning herbs from Maeve like a daughter would a mother, Sheriff Clay often asked for her. Thoughts before meetings, admitting once, I've been in this uniform for 20 years and never seen someone take a town like you did, without needing a badge. One evening, Thomas knocked on her door again. No expectations this time, just words. I'm leaving, he said, to make something out of myself. For real this time. Maeve looked at him, and her voice was soft, kind, but firm. Don't come back just to be saved. Come back only if you've learned to stand. Thomas nodded. He meant it, and she could finally let go. The church bells rang louder these days, not in warning, but celebration. Snow began to melt. Spring peeked through in wildflowers, growing near the ridge where they once laid traps. Children now played Maeve verses, the marked suns like it was some frontier legend. Maybe she was, on the day the new town sign was raised. Maeve stood beside the mayor. He pulled off the cloth to reveal it. Welcome to Hollow Creek, the town that was saved by an Irish bride. The crowd clapped, some cried. Maeve, she just smiled. Not because she needed the credit, but because they finally believed in something they built together. As night fell and lanterns flickered across porches, Maeve stood on the same platform where she was once introduced as just a mail-order bride. She looked into the eyes of those around her. Don't ever let the world tell you where you belong. Not a contract, not a man, not even the past. You decide who you are. That's what saves a town. That's what saves you. The wind picked up again, but this time Hollow Creek didn't flinch, and neither should you. If Maeve's journey moved your heart even just once, then don't leave without doing something simple but powerful. Hit that like button. Drop a comment. What part hit you most? Subscribe for more stories like this, because the frontier still has many tales left to tell. Your support keeps legends alive. This was Irish mail-order bride. Arrived as worst winter in history began, until she saved the town. And this was Hollow Creek's story. But maybe it's yours too.